What's going on, Exiles? It's Gemini, and there has been another beta patch. This one includes passive tree changes. Fortify has been reduced to 20% damage reduction from hits. That's down from 25%. It's a pretty big nerf. New versions of Shock Nova, Punishment, and Arctic Armor. Rebalances to various skills, including Ice Crash. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the major passive tree changes. So Holy Fire has been repositioned, and in its place has been replaced with Explosive Impact, 25% increased fire damage, 4% increased radius of area skills. It's important to note that this works for everything that has area, your auras, your curses, war cries. It's not just your fire skills. We have Mental Rapidity with 6% cast speed and now 20% increased mana regen. So these were pretty bland. When you get all three, they averaged out to 4% cast speed nodes, but now they're much more appealing. It's like you get a little less than 7% mana regen. And then we have the Nimbleness on the other side between Witch and Shadow. This one was the same thing, but now has 4% movement speed and 15% chance to avoid interruption from stuns while casting. If we look over here, we have Throat Seeker. It's swap sides. It's actually off the same 10 int node, but we have cold and fire damage. So this is like a different version of the Stormweaver wheel, but it comes with 30% crit chance instead of mana regen. So we have some fire and cold synergy, and you can get fire or cold damage on the left or right side. That's a nice 8/8 hybrid node, so people may make some interesting builds with cold and fire damage. The Nimbleness node went down one, so it's not off a main highway. However, we have this lightning damage wheel, Crackling Speed. 16% increased lightning damage, 4% increased cast speed, and 10% crit multi. So this is good news to lightning crit casters. Moving along, I think almost everything on the right side with Ranger has stayed the same. There may be a few minor numerical adjustments, maybe with dual wielding nodes. Those actually look the same. Testudo shield block nodes, these got buffed up by 1% each. Testudo remains the same, but Iron Reflexes has been repositioned. It's in a it's in a much more accessible spot for my current build. It's only 3 points away, whereas before it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This still feels a bit empty, and it feels like they can put something here. But for now, Iron Reflexes is right here. I'm happy with that. I'm definitely a lot closer. Suddenly, Carcass Jag seems way more appealing. I did end up dropping Revelry because it lost its 10 mana gain on kill. Instead, I opted to go Righteous Decree, and it's been working out pretty well. Blood Magic, it's been given and blessed with a lot of life. We have 10, 10, and 15 next to Mortal Conviction. This is very, very, very good for Blood Magic. They definitely got some love. In addition, we have Ironwood off of this node. I'm not sure if that's the same or if that's changed. They have improved the sword damage nodes and some of the axe ones numerically. I guess they were not that appealing, or they felt like it needed to be addressed. In addition to all these passive tree changes, there has been global nerfs to two-handers. So if you look at your two-hander on beta, mine actually went down about 23 DPS, but I looked at some of the ones that I had in the stash, and they went down as high as around 32 DPS. So the bases have been altered, and it's not prejudiced. I checked all the staves, swords, axes, and maces. I guess the GGG felt like the two-handers were doing too much damage, and they're getting some other buffs in other ways. Let's go ahead and look at some of the additions in this patch that have been discovered and posted on Reddit. Cold Steel Viridian Jewel is a large radius. Increases and reductions to physical damage and radius are transformed to apply to cold damage. Increases and reductions of cold damage and radius are transformed to physical damage. That's pretty interesting. I'm eager to see what people come up with. If I get this gem, well, I guess we can tinker around with it and see what we can do. Punishment has been changed completely. It has a base duration of 9.4 seconds. This one's a level 5 one. But cursed enemies grant 27% more physical damage, more physical melee damage on melee hit. This means when you're struck by a mob with punishment, he gives you a buff. Cursed enemies grant you 12% increased attack speed on melee hit. Buff is applied for a base duration of 4 seconds. Now, this has two duration components. One where it lasts on the mob, and then two, when they hit you successfully, you take another duration that's separate. This one can be enhanced by increased duration. This is a very situational curse. I can see this, benefiting you on maybe like the Atsiri trio, where you're guaranteed to get melee physical mobs. But it doesn't work with casters or ranged characters like skellies, archers. I don't know if I would use this all the time. I'm almost certain that I wouldn't. Would I level one up? Sure. It can be situationally very strong, but not a curse that I would use all around. Pretty cool. May have some really good PvP usages and like against melee characters. We have another jewel. This one's a little bit small. 14% increased maximum energy shield, and it has a large radius. Increases and reductions to life in radius are transformed to apply to energy shield at 50% of their value. So this is the first time we've seen a ES increase on a gem, and man, it looks pretty cool, especially with that large radius. I imagine people will get creative with it. I haven't actually looked on the skill tree to find the best position for it, but I'm sure it won't be too hard. And now we have Arctic Armor. At level 18, it does 12% less physical damage taken when hit, and 12% less fire damage taken when hit. So what does this mean, this less? It's a multiplier. It's amazing for big hits and not so good on small hits. Now, it used to be a flat damage value, so let's take an example like an incinerator or the void bearers who do frequent fire damage. You were able to mitigate it at one point with about 210 on a really high powered Arctic Armor with Inner Force and Devotion. Now it's just going to be less mitigation on those small hits, but it's still going to be very substantial. Will this help you on Atsiri? Indeed, it'll help with Flame Blast. Flame Blast is an on-hit. On-hit can be from a spell, or it can be from an attack. It just has to have a hit component, meaning degens won't count. So if you're ignited, or if you're touching Righteous Fire or Searing Bond, that won't be mitigated. So overall, it's a 25% mana reserve, so it's equivalent to a Herald. And it also chills enemies on hit for 0.5 seconds when hit. And if you put increased duration, that'll also affect mobs that are like not in your proximal PBAOE melee range. If a ranger is shooting you from a distance, they will be chilled for a split second, and that'll give you another layer of defense. Arctic Armor I see as being almost mandatory for the majority of hardcore players. Either they'll choose to sacrifice a Herald or pick up more reservation nodes like Sovereignty and run it. I mean, it's just too good to not have at this point. So you no longer have to recast it every time you zone into an instance. It still has that trail, and it's important to note that you only get the physical and fire damage reductions, or the less damage, when you're not moving. So my character is using Leap Slam as a mobility. If I'm getting tagged by a hit while I'm in the air or in the process of a leap, then yeah, I won't get the reduction. But as long as I'm just swinging a weapon, leaping from point A to point B, whenever I am swinging and not doing anything else, I'm getting that mitigation. So it's really, really, really good. Not so good for, say, somebody who's focusing on cycloning or using RF as their major, offensive ability. But overall, pretty awesome change to Arctic Armor. I love it. I love it. I love it. And here we have big nerfs to Herald of Ice and Herald of Thunder. The pre-nerf damage, the X to Y at which it adds or adds to your attack or spell, it goes from 62 to 79 to 53 to 35 to 53. Now this is for spell, and I imagine this is for attack, because attack you can scale it with like wet and things like that, and I think it goes a little bit crazy. But these are pretty substantial nerfs to Herald of Thunder and Herald of Ice. So this is going to affect shock duration in a big way. I was using Herald of Thunder to shock everything with any build that I was running that had crit. But the secondary effects were unchanged. The damage effectiveness has been increased to 40%, and they're still at 25% reservations. Now this is a Google doc that somebody made with all the updated changes. Shock Nova has completely changed mechanically. You used to do 6 to 108 shock in one thing, and it had a dead zone where it did 0 damage. Now it does 16 to 49 damage, and it does 50% less damage in the ring. 15% chance to shock as a base. You don't need quality to shock. And a critical strike chance to 6%, which is very, very good. Punishment, we read off the punishment and the Arctic Armor. That has completely changed. Ice Crash, the base of it has been nerfed to 150%. Attack speed is the same. The second hit takes 20% less damage, and the third hit takes 40% less. So that's a pretty substantial nerf. Firestorm is now 4 to 10 fire damage, duration 2 seconds, impact at 0.1 second. So the duration has been increased substantially at a sacrifice of a little bit of damage. I think it's going to be a huge quality of life for that. Herald of Ice has been improved for attacks. We have Flame Blast. Flame Blast has 0.2 cast speed. Ethereal Knives, what's changed about this? 6% crit, reportedly scales better at higher levels. Okay, so we can't really see that. Lightning Arrow has a 90% base damage, so that's an increase. That's pretty good. Rain of Arrows has 100% base attack damage. Nice buff to Rain of Arrows. Searing Bond has been buffed. Nice. Spark. Okay, so this is at very low level, so it's hard to see exactly what's going on, but it looks like a slight damage increase. Poison Arrow, 30% physical damage added as Chaos. 3.8% base damage. 2.8 second duration. Mana cost has been increased slightly. Okay. And Arctic Breath has seen a substantial damage increase. I'm sure this is much higher at higher levels. Penetration gems have been increased, or actually it's been buffed in a way that you get less penalty on your mana multiplier, so it's much easier to run it. 140 versus 150. That's a pretty big deal, especially when you're using expensive spells. Flame Totem, let's see, it's received a increase in mana cost, so that is a nerf. Flame Totem was so strong and everybody was using it, and it was hard to justify using anything else, and I guess they want to make it more taxing on your mana. But this has been a small overview of the changes. I'm sure there are many that I've missed, but hopefully this keeps you up to date on the immediate changes that people have noticed. Thank you guys for tuning in, and if you guys enjoyed this video, feel free to hit the like and subscribe. I'll continue to do more Act 4 beta content, and thank you guys for watching. Peace.